Greetings, everyone. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you are here. Welcome to this new moon forecast where we go over the main astrological themes for the upcoming new moon, which will be in the zodiac sign of Gemini. It's on the 26th of May. We're going to look at the main astrological themes from the new moon into the next major lunation is first quarter moon and then into the full moon. So the next 2 weeks ahead, we're going to look at the main astrological themes. So welcome back. Thank you for being here. And thank you for visiting this channel. If this is the first time that you're here, as always, if you want to support any of the content creators' channels that you frequent and gather information and knowledge and glean your wisdom from, you can interact with that content by liking, subscribing, all the things, all the things, in order to support their channel. Even hitting the like button actually does a lot, or commenting or sharing. So subscribing to the channel if you've listened a couple times and you're like, I do really like this content. It really does actually help a lot to spread to a larger audience. So, whew, boy, where do we even start? Okay, now we got that spiel out of the way. And the only other PSA I'm going to put out there today, guys, is just to stay tuned, because for promotional content or promotional information about the upcoming June solstice, I will have a reading sale available for those who are interested in the change in the quarterly season and how that affects your different charts. And there will be a special report for the June solstice and the 3 months ahead, which is going to take us out of the eclipse cycle once we get into September, October as well. So it's also a good time to check in on that cycle, the eclipse reading and the eclipse cycle, which is a 6-month cycle. So these change in seasons, the solstices and the equinox, actually are a great time to check in about that cycle as well. So there'll be a reading sale. There will be a special report that will be probably in its entirety only available to Catalyst membership. So if you're interested in that, that's in the description box below as well. A link to that, and that's a paid membership directly through my website with exclusive content and discount codes. Next week, for those of you who are members at the plus and premium level, kind of like gasoline, right? At the plus and premium level, your second energy reading is going to be coming out next week. So that's something to keep an eye out for in an email. And of course, if you're interested in not only supporting these bi-monthly forecasts out on this channel publicly, but if you want to get something every week and get more into the intuitive aspects of my readings, then you can consider membership. And there's a link in the description box. Okay. We have this upcoming new moon in Gemini. Okay, so we'll do a little bit of retrospective about the lunar cycle we're coming out of currently as I'm recording this, which is the 23rd. But we're going to be really focusing on this general concept of faith in the sustaining power of life. And the Sabian symbol for the upcoming new moon, as we're going to see when we really dig into the astrology, is this very full and built out well with a bucket and a rope. All the infrastructure is there. It's been dug out. It's under the shade of this majestic tree, which suggests this natural connection as well to the elements. And it's the idea that all of the things are here, and it's just a matter of trusting that the well will be filled. And then we have all of the tools in order to harness that. So if we were to just take a moment and go over the last month since the last lunar cycle, which was a new moon in Taurus, we had a full moon in Scorpio, we had that Sun-Uranus conjunction, which was a type of how do I say this? A type of harmonic, some sort of resonant harmonic, some other octave or experience of something that happened last July, which was when Mars and Uranus came into conjunction with the star Algol, which is in the head of the Gorgon or Medusa. And I encourage you, if you haven't listened already, to go back on this channel and find the previous video about the Sun-Uranus conjunction and about star seeds and the need for us to be comfortable with the surprises, right? Because if you think the veil is lifting now, oh boy, July is going to be fun. June into July is going to be where you discover your metal, right? Where you discover what you're truly made of and what is emotionally grounding all of us. Because Saturn is going to come into Aries, Neptune's going to station retrograde in Aries. Those two are eventually going to come into a conjunction. Not to get too ahead of ourselves here, because that's going to be much more for the upcoming solstice report. But also too that Uranus in early July is going to come into Gemini as well. So talk about your mind being blown, right? So, but in the meantime, that Sun-Uranus conjunction, we can't plan. We can only plan for things that we expect. And Uranus is the element of the unexpected surprise, the thing that kind of turns you on your head in order to give you a completely different perspective. In fact, the planet Uranus, it rotates on an axis that from our perspective would be horizontal. It is turned for whatever reason, and it spins in a direction that is perpendicular basically to what everything else in the solar system spins, apparently. So the idea here is that Uranus, by shifting that perspective and forcing us into a new perspective, is kind of opening the Stargate, so to speak, right? The quantum potential is given to us through Uranus. And it's usually through things that we don't expect, but also this sense of rebellion and breaking free. And as the ruling planet of Aquarius, you're talking more about the collective experience as a whole and something that up levels. It's kind of like a modulating factor here when Uranus kind of steps in. And it's not always exciting or mind-blowing in a good way. And so I've definitely, and anytime there's a conjunction or a square or an opposition to Uranus, it usually is something that can be, especially conjunctions, they really just activate each other. And this is what we just had along with this full moon. And so like I said, I encourage you to go back and listen to that video, that check-in, because it is the precursor to the reading that I did for the membership, which, I mean, for anybody that saw it, you could probably attest to the fact of like, oh yeah, there it is. I know personally of a few people who have had some very shocking and very disruptive in not a positive way with this Sun-Uranus conjunction, and Algol, the head of the Gorgon or Medusa, often leads to the death of something or is at least related to the death of something. And I saw that in a number of different things. And it's always things we don't account for, that we're surprised by, and they happen so rapidly that our whole perspective shifts in like an instant, right? So that's been going on along with Black Moon Lilith, something else I talked about in that video, and certainly the reading, being in opposition to that. And one of the themes, and I'm very curious and excited in true Gemini fashion here, to see how all of these pieces I've personally collected, it's very Gemini. I don't have any Gemini in my natal chart, just to be clear. It's all in my draconic or souls chart. The galactic oversoul is a reading that I do, and we look at the draconic chart, which is the template of your soul before incarnation. So it's all Gemini, actually, in that chart, but not a single bit in the natal chart. So it makes things very interesting for me personally. However, in true Gemini fashion, all these different threads that I've been collecting all week, I'm really curious to see how they are going to weave into the astrological transmission. So one of those, there's so many threads, but and there's a lot of starseed aspects that are going into this as well. But actually, I'll just show you one of the threads right now, and then we're going to talk about solar weather and space weather, because that's another really important thread as well. So One of the things that came up really strongly, just intuitively, and I don't really have an image for it. And I think that this image that is on the screen here of the bucket and the well that's filled with water, and this real faith in the sustaining power of life, which is nature to fill the well, is this concept of the heyoka. And so some of you may be familiar with this, maybe more than familiar. Some of you may identify as a heyoka. And in the indigenous American tradition, in particular, the heyoka refers to like a sacred clown, essentially. So the idea of one who, and this actually is starting, even just right now as I'm speaking it, it's starting to weave into some of the other things that are going to come up astrologically about this idea of the sacred clown and the idea of humor, but also too being type of like a jester, like a release valve socially through humor or through clowning in some way, which is a lot of exaggerated things, maybe playing the fool, so to speak. If you've ever been into like professional wrestling, for instance, yes, it's all scripted, but one person often, or maybe, multiple people, depending on what's going on, there's always a heel, right? There's always a bad guy that takes all of the damage from the audience, but really it's all scripted. And you can think about it in that way, that's scripted at more of a spiritual level. And the heyoka, as the sacred clown, will take on the karma or take on, and I'm not suggesting people are supposed to do this. This is a very shamanic position. Will take on the karma or take on the likeness of that which is representative of the shadow or the darkness, and it wards it off. It also dispels the intensity of that through humor and clowning. So there's a lot of different roles, but the heyoka came up really strong, and it has often, right? Especially when we're going to talk about Uranus coming into Gemini, but this position of Black Moon Lilith has really been coming in for me in this heyoka energy. So Black Moon Lilith is the lunar apogee, as many of us know. It is the point in the lunar orbit that's furthest from the planet. And when in astrology, this represents something very deep and primal, something deeper than our own subconscious or the living soul. And it's an experience of something that is so dark that we often will fear it or we have shame about it, but it's something that is necessary. This void is the place where divine intervention comes in, the divine flame, the Holy Spirit, right? The Pentecost. This space within ourselves that is, the void, so to speak, that can lead into the mouth of madness. You know what I mean? That's a John Carpenter movie. If you want to really flip your lid and you're into John Carpenter, watch the Apocalypse trilogy. It's not meant to be a trilogy, but The Thing, In the Mouth of Madness is the third one, and then the second one, The Prince of Darkness. I can't believe I forgot the title. Watch that set of movies. Whoa, you'll get some perspective on what the hell's going on right now. So the heyoka. And forgive me for being more long-winded and more verbose than I usually am. I've just been having some stomach issues the last day or so, and I suspect that it's actually, that it's partially about, things that I've consumed, especially the raw milk that doesn't quite last the whole week until the next farmer's market. And I really need to be doing more of a smell test, which is a great, actually, metaphor for lots of things. So that's part of it. But even today, it's more just right in the solar plexus. And I don't have anything that I'm personally anxious about, but clearly I'm picking up on something. And my cat is as well, because he has not been having a good day. So in order to address the discomfort, I've used a number of herbal remedies, and one of them in particular will make me a little bit more long-winded and prone to narrative and storytelling and being a little less focused. So forgive me, but that's just how it is today. And the heyoka, this is one of the threads that's come out that's really been sitting with me all week, and especially with Black Moon Lilith being in these last degrees of Scorpio, in opposition to Uranus, in opposition to the Sun, and right now in opposition to our main star of this forecast, which is Mercury. Because not only is Mercury coming home to Gemini, not only are we in Gemini season, we're coming to a Gemini new moon. There's a lot of connections, larger transits that are going to be happening with Mercury in Gemini in the coming 2 weeks. And so, which is also the magician, right? And that, in true Gemini fashion, there are two faces to that coin, right? And the Prince of Peace and the Prince of Darkness, right? Two sides of that same coin. And that's going to be something that comes up quite a bit, I think, as well. So, and that's where the Heyoka energy comes in, with where Black Moon Lilith is in opposition to all of this energy in Taurus. So from a starseed perspective, if I've ever read for you for Alpha Centauri, which is where Black Moon Lilith is pretty much sitting in opposition to all of this Taurus energy. So Alpha Centauri is our closest stellar neighbor. It's about 4.5 light years away. It's a triple star system with two larger stars that are in more immediate connection with each other, and then a third red dwarf, but it's all part of the same system. And it's in the constellation of the Centaur, right? It's actually in the front leg or the front knee of the Centaur, Sagittarius, the constellation. It's not the constellation of, it's the constellation of Centaurus anyway, but it's very much connected to Sag. So Alpha Centauri, if there was ever a starseed origin that was naturally resonant with the role of the Heyoka, it would be the Alpha Centaurian starseeds. And this is where Black Moon Lilith, is sitting right now. And I feel like that there is a real need for those of us to really be able to look in the mirror of ourselves, look in the mirror of all of the relationships around us that we're interacting with, be willing to look into the mirror of society, and not only come to terms with our own shadow or our own reflection, but find that place within us where we are kind of being able to see the humor, feel the humor, and even act out the humor, right, in that clowning way. Because I forecast, I'm not going to predict necessarily, but I forecast with Neptune in the position that it's in Aries, and having all of these sextiles to the early Gemini energy, when it's still very vague right now, but when Neptune stations retrograde and it meets Saturn, I think that's going to be a real eye-opener. You know, the fog clears away and we see ourselves in the mirror very clearly, collectively, individually, at a soul level. And I think that there's a real need as well to really embrace what we've been going through for the past 3 to 4 weeks, be able to find that place within us that is able to reflect that back out, just as the Heyoka does, to find the humor, to trust our gut as we move forward. That's a big part of this. And whatever surprise came up, realizing that all of it can be transmuted into something transmuted into light, basically, right? That the light extinguishes the darkness. And sometimes we have to really descend into that place, much like the Heyoka would do, in order to absolve everyone of our karma or our sin, quote unquote. This is why comedy is so dangerous and so necessary as a performance art. And in fact, this is where Neptune right now is sitting at 2 degrees Aries, because the comedian that reveals the human nature, the Heyoka, that clowns out the darkest part of ourselves, is how we actually come to grow and to learn, right? And to embrace and absorb that darkness, right? Not to let it take us over and be the primary, primary factor, because then, especially with Black Moon Lilith in a retrograde in Scorpio, it's very easy to succumb to that darkness and to hide it, to push it away, to ignore it, rather than let it be the release valve that we all need it to be. So there's elements of needing to trust our gut. This is what we've been doing for the past 3 weeks, especially with this new moon, right? That we put intention out there to be able to reasonably anticipate what's coming. Well, now we're coming into Gemini season and the mind is going to get hyper involved. We got to know that we can trust our intuition and be able to, essentially cease to both sides, to function as the magician, to take ourselves out of the equation, not entirely, because we have to still be involved in order, again, to trust our gut, but we also have to trust spirit, trust nature, trust the divine plan. And this is what this 7 degrees of Gemini, this well with the bucket, because we've been, we've already crafted and created quite materially the infrastructure and the tools and the skills necessary to gather in what we will need that will be provided for us, which I think is going to be information. And of course, knowing your own chart is going to really help in terms of how, and that's why we use tropical and Western astrology. I mean, sidereal astrology is much more useful for predicting, events in real time as things move through the constellations. But the tropical and Western astrology we use as a tool for our own development and growth. But it still does ripple out. And the experiences of the collective do definitely come in and have an impact on the way that we move through the world and what we think, and certainly how we feel. There'll be lots of feels, don't you worry. Coming into Cancer season is going to be deep in the feels, as we normally would be, except it's going to be in all these squares to Saturn and Neptune in Aries. So I want to share as well. Let's see here. We're going to share a different... Hi there. We're going to share a different... This is my homage to Venus in Aries right now, and we're going to talk about this as well. This is our friend Veruca Salt. As many of you probably are aware of, either you've read Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, or you've read it, or you're just familiar, or you've read it, you've watched the movie, you're familiar with Veruca Salt. And she's actually in a red dress, which is very, in my opinion, very much Venus in Aries, which is where she is right now. Venus, the planet Venus, is in the zodiac sign of Aries, and this, I can't get this one, especially the last couple of days, as she's really been moving through that second decan, right? That 10 to 20 degrees of Aries of Veruca Salt is kind of the perfect, and like I said, my homage to Venus in Aries. And she really represents right now Venus in Aries, the I want it now. I want it right now. I want the world. I can't remember exactly the lyrics, right? Wrap it all up in my pocket. Give it to me now. Right, this is Venus in Aries, and this is a very difficult, this has been a very difficult transit. You can see this energy really putting itself out there in the public realm in terms of more and more people, either influencers, media people, just the general consensus with anybody paying attention to the Department of Justice, certain things that people are demanding more and more and more to be released. And I'm not saying I know what's going on and why things are exactly happening, but what I can say is that I get this Veruca Salt vibe, and it just continues to grow and grow and grow. And so Venus in Aries, right? I want it now. And the thing is, this is a very dangerous energy, considering everything else that is going to be going on in the next 2 weeks, and certainly from the solstice leading into July. And so for those who have not faced their own dark side and dealt with everything that goes along with that. For those who are not patient, and I would say one of the primary, I would say, focal points to get through, strangely enough, would be the Virgo energy, which is where the South Node is. Mercury is exalted and also rules the Virgo energy. Chiron, also in Aries, rules the Virgo energy. And so there is work to be done on actually taking this dynamic, bold, passionate energy of Venus in Aries and Mars in Leo, by the way. They just came into a trine with each other, and direct it into something constructive. But we need patience and discipline. And we don't have a lot of Virgo right now. And it's just the South Node. And so kind of leaning in a little bit into where we've been and how we've maybe mastered this energy at a different point might be useful in order to harness this. Otherwise, I mean, we all know the fate of Veruca Salt, right? Off to the incinerator, to the garbage pit she went. And so we don't necessarily want to settle into a material reality when Venus does come into Taurus that is us being in the garbage pit. And I think that there will be plenty of people that this is well on its way, right? There's no real talking anybody out of this performance that we're going to see with Venus in Aries. So again, my homage to Venus in Aries, and just thinking about how we can, yes, there is passion and desire and potentiality and this sense of I want it now, but how are we going to, it's just like the well might be empty right now and we want it now. What are we going to do? Are we going to force, how are we going to force the hand of God or nature to fill that? Well, I mean, that's about being in relationship, which is something Venus is meant to be involved with, is the realm of relationship. And when she's in Aries, she really is just like Veruca Salt. So finding a way to temper this energy and using it constructively is something we can work on right now. Like I said, Venus and Mars are just coming off of a fire trine as of today. So one more thing I want to talk about here. We've talked about Heyoka. We've talked about Venus and Aries. We've kind of touched on here the general theme of this upcoming new moon in Gemini. One thing I want to talk about, and this is something that I'm always going to keep reminding you of, and many of you are already aware, you're working with this energy, but if you are new or you're still not really following the space weather, I'm just going to give you my perspective, and I do it all the time because I think that understanding our physical, the holistic aspect, not just the physical, the holistic aspect of being in this form, right? Being human, being on Earth, being a soul in this experience, the electromagnetic aspect is really primary. In my opinion, it's all energy, right? That's from the woo perspective. So let's bring that into more of a material thing. And we realize that electricity, magnetism is very essential for our functioning. And so one of the things I'll share on the screen, and then this actual study is going to be linked in a pinned comment below, but I am going to also read from the abstract because there's just more and more information coming out. Let's make sure, right? There's more scientific papers coming out, and this was from Suspicious Observers. I got this link, and multiple videos keep talking about the more and more of the lit reviews and the experiments and the peer-reviewed papers that are coming out about the biophysical effects of magnetic storms on the human body. It's really important that we understand all of these things because it's going to continue to be more and more important to be able to actually feel the difference. And that's something that we may have, depending on where Taurus is in your chart, or even where Gemini is in your chart. If it's in second house energy for you, I mean, this might actually be very relevant to your physicality, right? Because second house energy is your body. It's the state of your health and your physicality and your field, right? And your electromagnetic field, the nature of the electricity moving through and around your body. EMF, native and non-native, is definitely going to have an impact on the second house. So, studying the biophysical effects Of what? Space weather. Okay. So I'm just going to read, and just in case you're listening and not watching, but if you do want to read the paper and actually see how they came to these conclusions, you can do that by going into the pinned comment below. While they're technological, okay, so it's talking about magnetic storms and the disturbances in the magnetosphere resulting from solar activity, such as flares and coronal mass ejections, right? We see the solar storms through the KP index when we have solar wind, solar flares, coronal mass ejections. So the technological effects are well documented. There is emerging research that is now coming up to explore the impact on human biology. So this paper reviews the mechanisms through which magnetic storms may affect the human body, examining evidence from cardiology, neuroscience, endocrinology, your hormones, right? Think about all of the people who are taking, for whatever reason, right, taking synthetic hormones for, it's not just when you're younger and making a transition, for instance, but also, too, there are plenty of people who are taking either synthetic estrogen or testosterone who are not trying to transition and are doing it just to be healthy. But I'm telling you what, synthetic hormones definitely come with a price. And so anyway, endocrinology and chronobiology. What? Oh, that's interesting. Chrono meaning light, light and biology. Understanding these effects can have important implications for public health, especially in vulnerable populations. So you can go read this, but it's just meant to reinforce how important it is to take seriously what's going on at that level and know what it feels like in your body, and specifically to know what it feels like when it's natural and when it is not natural, like non-native EMF, for instance. So there's also going to be a link to a video from the channel Look Out for Charlie. I know sometimes he's kind of hard to listen to because he gets into the nitty-gritty of audio stuff, and sometimes I have to take a step back just because I'm not in the frame of mind to really get deep into what he's doing. But he did just put up a video about the Schumann resonance and the hijacking of it. I don't know anybody else. I would love to know any other person in the either spiritual or woo community that actually has the same perspective. And I know people that listen to this channel have, through their own experiences, also have this perspective, but he just talks about how the Schumann resonance as, the natural resonance coming from the Earth's electromagnetic field has been hijacked. And so I really encourage you to listen to that video because the way that he describes it is very similar to the way I've come to understand it. And my perspective has definitely evolved over time. The more I started paying attention and realizing that, extremely low frequency from the planet could be definitely used as a carrier wave. The more that I learned about sound and cymatics and just the electromagnetic spectrum in general and how it functions, this started to make more sense, especially when how many of you feel really crappy when we get these huge swells in the Schumann resonance amplitude, right? There's a reason for that. And there is a difference between the natural upgrades and maybe the detox that's coming from that and this type of artificial swelling of the Schumann. And I think it's worth continuing to investigate because as we come into Gemini season and we're talking about Mercury and Gemini, this is, the functioning of our nervous system, right? Sensory and perception. Sensory might be Taurus, but perception is definitely Gemini, right? And how we adapt to the environment through our nervous system and our perception, our conscious mind. And I think this is going to really, those types of events, even if they're completely natural, these magnetic storms have an impact on the way we perceive things. And again, the Look Out for Charlie video is really good. He talks about certain social conditions that are really amplified by the hijacking of the Schumann. And then on top of that, imagine just the natural changes that are likely to occur when you just take into effect the disturbances from what the sun is doing. You start to see that maybe there's a piggybacking off of this effect, and really to just steer society and the culture psychologically in a certain direction. I don't know. It's just an idea. Let's see how long this video stays up on YouTube, even mentioning something like this. So the Schumann has not been swelling, thankfully. There is a very large coronal hole that is facing us right now, but it's so far south we might have managed to not get the full extent of the solar wind. So that's a good thing. But we have had a lot of seismic activity that has been large in the last week or so, and I suspect there'll be more to come. But the magnetic field weakening, just like when our own field is weak and you have holes in your aura, so to speak, like this is where things can go awry. And so I think if there's some help from technology in order to do this, I think that it is being done. That's my opinion. So knowing the difference and being able to protect yourself and do your best to mitigate those. Oh, wow. I did a whole series about that called Defense Against the Dark Arts. And there's 3 videos on this channel that I uploaded that talk all about the biochemistry, the sound and light vibrational stuff that you can do, and then the W-band, which I think is really important to understand in order to understand how the tech works. Anyway, I will talk about this all the time. So if this is new to you, better strap in because this is something that I'm going to talk about a lot. Okay, friends. Now it's time to get into the astrology, which is what we're here for. And it is our temporal map to the past and the future simultaneously. It's pretty amazing, actually. All right, so share the screen. I also, real quick, just to orient us to the actual sky here, where are we? I'm going to show you stellarium. I want to show you where the Sun and Mercury are currently sitting, which is the star Aldebaran. Window. There we go. All right, friends. So, this is actually where Venus is. She's in the stream between Pisces, although she is in the zodiac sign of Aries. So, let's see here. I want to show you. Nope. Here we go. I want to show you Mercury. There we go. And the Sun. So hopefully that's, yes. So these two, as you can see, are in the constellation of Taurus, right? Because they, right now, Mercury is in the left shoulder, which is the Pleiades, right? Also in alignment to the star Algol. If I were to minimize it, you can see the head of Medusa right here and Algol. So there's a longitudinal connection here. But the thing I want to point out is that Mercury and the Sun are going to come into a conjunction or a cazimi, and they are going to be pretty much right on top of the left eye of the bull, which is the star Aldebaran. Fun fact, this is the star system that the Vril Society, you know how they were connected to that particular regime over there in Europe in the 40s, the Vril Society and their collection of mediums and channelers, they believed that they were channeling and communicating with beings from the star system. You guessed it, Aldebaran. So I want to put some attention here as well. It is currently in the zodiac sign of 9 to 10 degrees of Gemini, and has a very strong significance in fixed star and ancient astrology. At one point, when this marked the vernal equinox, thousands of years ago, it was considered the Watcher of the East and is one of the royal fixed stars. It is related to Archangel Michael, right? The leader, the military leader of the heavenly army. So if you're into if you're into that perspective, this star is a representative of Archangel Michael. It also has a whole host of interesting things connected to it, but it also is one of the Behenian fixed stars, and that's something you can look up. Behenian, Behenian, Behenian fixed stars. There's 15 of them, and they have a number of qualities attached to them as well. And this one is of the flying man, right? And so it's also the left eye of the bull. So, the occult symbolism abounds here, my friends. And so this is where Mercury and the Sun are going to come into conjunction, which is always quite an opening in terms of communication, the social buzz. People are talking, especially in Gemini, Mercury's home sign. So you can bet there's going to be a lot of conversation, and there's going to be people taking some real risks here, which, if you are more like our friend Veruca Salt and you get to this point and take the nosedive thinking I want it now and I'm going to get what I want, you again may end up in a compromised position. So we'll talk more about that as we get to this point, but I just wanted to show it to you. This is what we got coming here over the next 2 weeks, and on to the actual chart. Can you believe it? Finally, how long have we been on this recording, and now we're actually getting into the astrology. So, all right, friends, here we go. New moon in Gemini. There we go. May 26th. 2025. I'm just closing out some windows here so we can consolidate all of our energy. Okay, and focus. Definitely need to consolidate my focus. Oh boy. See, this is the problem with having no Gemini in your natal chart and having all Gemini in your draconic chart. There is a piece of me that is definitely attempting to just be the flying man in my own mind, just wherever it takes me, right? Very ADHD in some cases. So I probably was ADHD in my last life. So considering the fact my soul is coming in with all of this energy, including a Sun conjunct Aldebaran. So, and of course, this is a really primary starseed position as well. It's part of the Hyades star cluster, even though it's kind of on its own. It definitely is a starseed position. So you can tell that there's going to be a big activation of that energy as well. And there just has been, right? The starseed stuff has become front and center again, because it's like we're in this time period where the reasons that we volunteered to come here for this time, for our various missions are coming into focus right now. So strap in, friends and starseeds, right? It's time to get to attention, right? Speaking of like Archangel Michael and leading the heavenly army here. So we talked a lot about this new moon, right? Which is at 6 to 7 degrees of Gemini, right? Mercury will have already got into Gemini. Uranus is still in conjunction with Algol, still with the Pleiades. Jupiter is been moving through Orion, and by this time is coming into conjunction with the star Betelgeuse, which is in the armpit of Orion, actually. If you were to look at the constellation, you'd see that the raised hand of Orion the hunter, usually as a club or something. Betelgeuse is right here, and it does indicate a type of vulnerability in there because he's exposed in the armpit, right? And you have your brachial plexus, all these nerves and blood vessels, right? It's all very exposed. There's not a lot of like fat or even like thick fascia or anything to protect what's going on in here. So Betelgeuse has this vulnerability to it as well, and this is where Jupiter is. And we have to take the risk, right? We have to take the risk of, just like Orion, of lifting the club in order to strike the blow. So again, there is this need to balance these things out, especially in coming into the solstice, coming into the full moon that we're going to talk about on the next forecast, coming into July, right? You can't necessarily just like fold up and hide, and so there has to be some measure of calculated risk, but we also have to trust that what we need is going to be provided, but we have to create the space in order for it to arrive in the first place. So and a trust in ourselves to kind of take that first step out. And Jupiter is all about the big picture and is very optimistic. And so I do feel like, too, that there is a lot of optimism around this new moon, a sense of, like I said, real trust in where we're headed. And the moon will also sextile Saturn, because Saturn will now be in Aries, and that's always a really, really grounding and determined energy. It gives us a lot of patience and self-determination when we're talking about the moon in Gemini, and it'll conjunct Mercury because it's going to be in Gemini. So faith in the hidden sustaining power of life, right? And the unimpeachable source of life on the side of self-renewal, right? And trusting that what we need is going to be provided, right? Like I said, I could say it over and over again. I could probably just be done with this in 2 seconds and be like, this is about trusting the universe to give, to guide and provide for us. The end. But one of the sticking points here is this, as you can see, it's pretty bold in terms of the rest of the astrology, is Mars in Leo in square to our friend Lilith in Scorpio. So she is in a retrograde. She has, by this point, moved away from this Heyoka position, Alpha Centauri position, and the real magic, I would say, the real sacredness to the Heyoka is this awareness on the part of the Heyoka or the medicine person that their sustaining power comes from something infinite, something that is at the core of everything, right? And so they're able to really give of themselves and to make sacrifices in order, for the community, for instance, or for the sake of some sort of spiritual progression. So, but Lilith has moved away from this point, and this square to Mars, also ruling Scorpio, one of the ruling bodies of Scorpio, is going to be very contentious, power dynamic type of energy at this new moon, right? So you have this sextile with Mercury and Neptune, so you just get remember, Neptune is still very much fogged over right now in terms of, looking in the mirror, right? It's kind of vague and distorted and kind of broad in terms of revealing human nature. And the Mercury, there is an innocence here, I would say, with Mercury, and a willingness, again, to kind of create the space, put out, Santa can't fill your stockings unless you put them out, so to speak, and have this kind of innocent trust and faith that it's going to be, you're going to receive the blessings. So this sextile with Mercury and Neptune, right, intuitive insights and really heightened intuition. And I would say, again, this is really going to support being able to trust our gut when we're like brainstorming or problem solving, right? And real empathic communication. So there's I feel like there's this sense of real hope and an ease to connect with our intuition and with nature, and this potential for personal self-renewal, enhancing that dreamy or imaginative quality with Mercury sextile Neptune. But the intuitive insight, I think, is going to be really a big part of that. So you have all this really positive energy, and then you have this Mars Lilith square. And again, power struggles and ego clashes, very intense emotional energy, very intense potentially sexual energy with Leo, because it's our individual lust, and Scorpio, which is the energy, sexual energy that is magnetic and pulls people into union, right? So there can be a lot of that, but also in a way that, especially with Lilith involved, in a way that brings up very deep-seated passions, but also jealousy, obsessive tendencies, right? And of course, Mars in Leo is going to be very dramatic and performative about it. So this could be very intense, and where your desires are magnetic and potentially destructive if you're not handling things consciously. So we have all this kind of like trust and faith and this sense of renewal, and then you have this this square here, that is really prompting inner conflict and shadow work. Okay. And again, there's real potential for creative transformation, but the power struggles here are pretty significant. You might feel that push pull between wanting to shine. And in the case of where Mars is in Leo, not even just shining, but just relaxing, right? Everybody is together on this houseboat and we're having a party, right? We're out to sea, we leave behind everything, and we're just enjoying the experience of being together and relaxed, right? If you've ever been on like a houseboat and having a party. The power struggle is going to be, I think, in the shadow work is the, what is coming up from the depths, right? And transmitting it, because people don't want to, people don't necessarily want to hear the full horrific truth, right? Because that's what you do in Scorpio. You get to the bottom of things, whether it's yourself, whether it's the dynamics in any relationship, whether it is the underlying energy, where it is brought from, and that's where you get, betrayal and, trust being broken, and there's definitely conflicts over dominance, right? And especially again in relationships. But I also do feel this sense of like a responsibility almost, or this things coming up from the depths that we can't necessarily like squash, even though we may want to just kind of let it go and like all be together, right? It's definitely still going to come up. And just being conscious of this, being aware, we may have to confront things like suppressed anger or shame or fears about expressing our true self, right? Especially because Mars is just like, oh no, I'm just, acting in, putting my personal action towards, we're all in this together, right? At least Mars in Leo has the courage to face the shadow. And I think that is probably one of the better scenarios out of this, is that you're consciously and intentionally leaning into the discomfort, leaning into the power struggle that's within you, each of us, and harness this energy for creative output or personal transformation. But we have to be very honest and willing to embrace our vulnerability with this. But if we're willing to do that, I think that it also initiates this growth potential with this new moon to really have our cup filled truly. But there has to be a cup to fill in the first place. And sometimes that feels like emptiness, that feels like a darkness that we want to run away from screaming, or something that we try to fill with something else, which is where things like addictions and all manner of destructive behavior can come out. So not to be too intense or anything, let's just right off the bat with this new moon. So this energy of the square, how you walk with it, how you work with it, how you sit with it, whatever it is you do with it is probably really going to be infused into the nature of this new moon, and whether we trust or we don't. Right? And we try to like force the issue, and we go back to Veruca Salt, right? She was just selfish, and she was just impetuous as a child, and was always given what she wanted. But that is the Venus and Aries energy. And so for those who are very demanding of this, or just so used to having what they want, I mean, this is going to be a very challenging time. And for those of us who are embracing that Virgo energy, like I said, all we have here is the South Node in Virgo, but there is a patience and a willingness to serve that I think is going, you want things to come to fruition. It comes from patience, knowing the right timing, right? Being in service to others. That's a real part of the Virgo energy, and how healing that actually is when we are also aware of our own shortcomings and our need to heal as well. So very intense to start off with. So as we go through the first week, right? The first week is where the crescent moon starts to build, and we start to get an idea of the different obstacles. We see that Mercury is definitely making its moves. Okay. And the big ones are the fact that it's going to come into a trine with Pluto. Speaking of intensity, again, it's going to come into a trine with Pluto, and everything that's going to come into Gemini is also going to trine Pluto retrograde in Aquarius. So this is just, the sun's already done it, then Mercury is doing it, and then eventually it's going to be Venus, but she's got some time. She's got lots of time left. She hasn't even left Aries yet. So it's going to be earlier in the day on the 27th where Mercury and Pluto come into their trine, right? Their air trine. And 4 degrees Gemini is it's really about nostalgia and learning to share the magic of our own self-renewal, right? And it's very encouraging. So the Sabian symbol for 4 Gemini is like holly and mistletoe, right? It just kind of brings up this energy that is pre-conscious, right? That it's something that is almost nostalgic and has a lot to do with renewal. So this has a lot to do with the encouragement of us as individuals at a personality level on the inner or subjective side of things, and life's continual stimulus to every resource of imagination and spiritual appreciation. So and a gift for participation in every expression of our individuality, right? So again, these symbols represent experiences or archetypes, and 4 degrees Gemini, it's something that goes back to something before we were even really conscious. It was just more of it's a renewal phase, I guess you could say. So now remember that Pluto is retrograde, and so a lot of what we've been going through for the past several weeks plus, we've kind of gotten a little bit of a break. It does feel like a little bit of reprieve at the social consciousness level, and the impact that it's been having. Maybe not for everybody, but for those who are actively paying attention. And so we kind of getting a sense of the battlefield and all the damage that's been done so far with the retrograde of Pluto. And we get to internalize that and, make adjustments and really embrace the transformation that has happened so far. And so Mercury now in Gemini, which is, in its home territory, there's a lot of mental agility and communication is very sharp, right? And when it comes to Pluto and what that planet rules, which is the sign of Scorpio, this energy of Mercury, or Hermes, as in mythology, is the only deity that could really traverse the underworld and come back. So this is a very useful time to take that curiosity, that quick thinking, that adaptability, that versatility of Mercury and Gemini, and really allow those stirs of deep introspection to prompt you to go deeper into it, right? And it's very enhancing of our ability to dive into those complex areas and those things about collective transformation when we're talking about Aquarius. So strategic thinking, research, right? Or even persuasive conversations when you have Mercury in a trine to Pluto, right? You can be very persuasive and you can really kind of talk people into things when you have a transit like this, especially in an air sign like this, or 2 air signs. So, you can really kind of get into the underlying motivations of core issues and be able to really communicate that to people, like really be able to talk to people. So, but you can get very obsessive and overly intense, right? And so I think that from the new moon, when you have Mars and Lilith in that square, and then you have this trine, people can get kind of really obsessive, get very intense, really want to share and communicate that which is coming up from the depths. And maybe that needs to be shared, but there is a time and place for everything. And again, being able to tap into your gut and knowing when the right time to maybe address things or to kind of avoid the mental burnout and find a balance here, because this type of transit can be very mental burnouty because you become obsessed. So using this energy constructively to explore transformational ideas, especially because again, Pluto's retrograde, so it might be more of an internalized experience. You may engage in meaningful dialogue that challenges the status quo, even in a one-on-one relationship. But you just want to make sure you don't become overly obsessed, as Mercury and Gemini it's endless. It's endless mutability. You can just take yourself, you can just tumble down the rabbit hole, so to speak. So that's something that you just want to be mindful of. But it also is really encouraging, if there are difficult conversations or things that need to be addressed at a much deeper level, I think the willingness to kind of tap into that nostalgia of a relationship or a different time, or in terms of a situation that you're part of, or maybe just in your own development, right? About self-renewal. I think that this is a very powerful transit. And of course, Mercury is going to meet the Sun at Aldebaran, which is something we already went over. So I'd like to share a little bit more with Aldebaran. So this is where those obsessive thoughts, and you can see at the same time here that the moon is going to be opposite Pluto as well. So there's definitely going to be some extra intensity around how we feel and how our mood is being expressed in opposition to all of this intensity. So 10 degrees Gemini, which is where Mercury and the Sun are going to come into their conjunction. So let's look at it exactly so we can see that that is the case. It's actually 9 to 10 degrees of Gemini, and we always round up for the Sabian symbol. What we see here is an airplane doing a nosedive, okay? So the idea here is that it represents the capacity to plunge into experiences with a complete disregard of consequences. But it also is to act in full independence of those things that everybody else accepts as limitations. You see what I mean here? This can go two ways, right? You're taking a risk, knowing and expecting that you're going to pull up at the right time, and reestablish control, so that to suit, what it is you're doing, right? Sometimes we do have to take a nosedive. Sometimes it's just necessary to take that nosedive. So, and righting ourselves when we need to, and reorient ourselves. So that's what this particular degree represents. So Mercury and the Sun come into conjunction right over the left eye of the Taurus, the Watcher of the East, Aldebaran, okay? So some of the positive aspects of this star are that it gives honor and intelligence and steadfastness, integrity. So think about all of these things: popularity, courage, ferocity. You kind of need these things in order to have the cojones, so to speak, to do some sort of intense nosedive and, basically mind over matter, right? You're bucking gravity here by doing this and playing around with it with the intention that, again, your mind is able to right the ship, so to speak. But this is about taking that plunge into an experience, right? Again, think about Veruca Salt and how we're coming into this, right? If we have some humility with this Virgo energy about where we've been at a soul level before, and thinking about Chiron and Mercury in that Virgo space, again, patience and a sense of practice and discipline, well, then we can see that there's honor and integrity and courage and ferocity. But the bad side of this, the very bad side of this left eye of the bull here, this Aldebaran star, is a tendency to sedition, and can be very argumentative, exaggerated, gives benefits that seldom last, right? Violence or self-destruction is possible. So for those, so Mercury coming into conjunction with the sun, of course, is going to heighten our communication. It's going to bring mental clarity and focus, right? The social buzz is really strong with Mercury, especially in Gemini, and there's the potential for overload, right? You can overstimulation, scattered thoughts, talking over others, right? And Gemini's duality might make you juggle too many ideas at once. So grounding is key. Well, this is like the epitome of grounding because you're literally taking a nosedive. You're plunging into an experience that is that you're completely disregarding the consequences potentially, or you're acting in full independence of those things which other people have accepted as a limitation, right? And so you're reorienting yourself. We are reorienting ourselves through every issue, and sometimes we have to take that plunge into the issue. So restless and riotous, this star is often considered, always stirring up popular dissent and revolution. This idea of having too much and juggling too much, I want you to put a pin in because we're going to talk about it in a little bit with another particular transit during this time. So the star is said to inflame the minds of the people with furious quarrels. Now go back to when we talked about the evidence of the magnetosphere being disturbed and how it has a impact on what? The nervous system, the endocrine system, the cardiovascular system. And then you get this star where Mercury in Gemini, right? This is as cognitive functioning as it gets with the sun, which is our hearts and our cardiovascular system, is the Aquarius nature, right? Ruled by Uranus. They're coming together in this conjunction, and it could either be violent and self-destructive, or it could be incredibly courageous and ferocious in a good way. Public honors, gain of power, wealth through others, the flying man, the magician, right? So the star is said to inflame the minds of the people with furious quarrels and to be an enemy of quiet and peace, madly desiring civil and domestic wars. So I would venture to guess that this particular transit will be utilized in this way very intentionally. Sudden and unexpected involvement in riots and sedition resulting in justly being condemned by the people. So, I mean, yes, you might find yourself kind of embroiled in something where there's going to be a plunge and taking a risk, but ultimately, you got Archangel Michael on the side of heaven and the divine. So, let's see how it goes here. But I would venture to guess that you're going to see something either communicated or an act in some way of making a plunge into a situation. But there could be overload, okay? There could be overload as well. So just keep that in mind as we go through all of this. Now we get to the first quarter moon, and this is what I asked you to put a pin in, because right before that, which is June 2nd, the moon, in Virgo. Interesting that would be our first quarter moon. I didn't even really make that connection till just now as I'm talking about Virgo energy is probably where we want to be in order to help really blend the mutability and ground it into something very physical, because that's what Virgo is. It's taking the materiality and making it functional from structure to function with the use of our mind and our intellect, right? The third house, our knowledge, our skill set. So the first quarter moon is going to be in Virgo, which is about, really harnessing power and really feeling that need to do so emotionally. Absolutely. But before we get there, there is a transit I'm going to show you, which is Venus in a sextile to Chiron. So Chiron is in Aries. It's conjunct the Andromeda galaxy right now. It's conjunct Chiron. I think I said sextile, but I meant conjunction. It's very much a conjunction, right? So this is more activating and less harmonious interaction and transformation. Conjunctions are usually kind of like, whoa, they're very activating and can be kind of explosive. And we're talking about 26 degrees Aries. This is also, like I said, in conjunction with the Andromeda Galaxy, which, as a starseed origin, is the Andromedans are definitely on the front lines of the social revolution. These are folks who, I just did a reading not that long ago for someone who had a lot of progressions now in the Andromeda area, and so that part of this person is really turning on right now, and it's these folks are very, freedom is the most important thing in terms of the Andromedan starseeds. Freedom to be themselves at any given moment, right? And to specifically to potentiate all of that desire through the freedom of movement and travel. Andromedan starseed people are very sensitive to emotional manipulation and gaslighting, and they'll be the first one to be like, bye, Felicia. Like, they just don't put up with it. Like I said, freedom is the most important aspect to Andromedan starseeds. They tend to also be very flaky in terms of being a human and navigating time, but also planning, because you make a plan and as an Andromedan starseed, and then later you're just like, oh yeah, I'm not feeling that right now, and so you end up canceling. And I know a lot of us do this, and I'm telling you, it has a lot to do with this energy in your chart. So, but they're also, like I said, they're also on the front end of like social evolution and revolution, because it's all about being free. And the Andromeda Galaxy in particular, this is like a whole different level, because you're talking about a galaxy outside of our own. So any of the this is just beings coming from a different physics engine entirely. And Venus and Chiron are conjunct with this energy. So it's really going to activate. I feel like that the wounding around self-worth, the wounding around our potential to really actualize our desires is going to be very palpable. And it's going to be very immediate. Perhaps some people will be like Veruca Salt, and they'll be, going down the trash chute, so to speak, because they didn't heed the warning of I want it now, and that compiles, right? I want this now, I want this now, I want this now. And 26 degrees Aries in Sabian symbol language is, basically a man possessed of more gifts than he can hold. And remember I talked about, the juggling of Mercury and Gemini. Well, imagine if you are attempting to hold every single spark of desire, right? That just becomes too much, and then you have to juggle it all, right? This is going to bring this up, and it's going to be very palpable. And I have a feeling this conjunction with Venus and Chiron is going to force the issue around really narrowing our focus and being sure that we're not attempting to hold more than we can. And it's not to say that there's no value in being able to have all of these gifts, but there is something to be said for being able to narrow our focus in order to establish what is most valuable in that moment. And the thing about Andromedan starseeds that makes this really easy is that it's so natural. Like any given moment, it just is. And you just tapped into what is at that given moment, and that's where the energy is projected out. I think some people, in terms of Chiron at this position, depending on where it is in your chart, is really being experienced as not taking any risk. Right? There we go with taking that risk again. Even if it's a risk of just trusting in the divine to provide, right? The universe guides and provides, right? So, but it also could have a lot to, so you don't take any risk. The other side of this Chiron wounding could be that, you get you want to hold all of it, right? I want it now, and you're not willing to let go any piece of it, and there are consequences to that, and I think that's going to be very felt with Venus and Aries meeting Chiron. So I think the wounding is going to be very palpable in whatever way. It's going to be something we're very aware of. Maybe it kind of rips the scab off a little bit. Maybe it's because we dropped things and we realized that we didn't kind of narrow our value, and we're trying to hold all this crap, and we can't really actually juggle. So that could be a way that it's brought out as well. But of course, with Chiron, it's all about discovering what your superpower really is, right? And you don't want to hang on to the victim role. You want to release yourself from the victim role and then take what you've learned and acquired and how you've healed and apply that to helping others. And I do feel like that there is a sense of empathy that could possibly be involved with Venus in this position of Aries, only because Venus is actually not so bad in the last decan of Aries, because she's getting close to her home territory of Taurus. And so the Four of Wands is Venus in this decan or last 30 degrees of Aries, the Four of Wands. So there's a completion, a circle completing in some ways. And yes, maybe we have to let go of some things. But that completion is something worth celebrating. And what we've learned from that, how we've healed, can be applied to service towards others. So I do feel like that this is a very very potent potential opportunity here, as with all, Chiron transits. But Venus is very palpable, and she has to do with what we value. And there are consequences right? There are boundaries that need to be put in place to substantiate our desires, right? Otherwise, they just stay desires, and we never initiate anything. So, and I think a lot of people struggle. And again, taking a risk, taking that plunge is, I think, part of this overall picture as well. And trusting, like, okay, I've created I've built the well, I've dug the well, I've created the well, I've put the bucket and the rope here, and this is what is growing over the time period of this first half of this lunar cycle. So, and then again, the moon in Virgo as our first quarter moon, our crisis in action, right? Where we kind of activate our personality at this point. And it's not enough, to achieve something, to kind of step forward and achieve something personal, which is the sun in Gemini, but the moon in Virgo is giving us a way to make that materially functional, right? Put it into a practice, into something that's going to bear fruit, right? And that's how we activate our personality around those things with this first quarter moon. So as we continue through the second half, right, leading up to the full moon, Mercury is going to, continuing with our theme here of Mercury, it's going to sextile Mars, it's going to sextile Chiron as well. Venus will come into Taurus. Mercury is going to meet Jupiter. It's just endless. It's going to square Saturn, and it's going to square Neptune. And then we're going to come to the full moon. So let's break this down a little bit after our Virgo first quarter moon. So this second week, which is early June, we're going to have this sextile with Mars. And so it really favors sharp thinking and confident action. So we have this taking this plunge and to apply it to some sort of practice, or apply some sort of practice or discipline, realizing in order to activate our personality, we actually have to be capable of emotionally kind of harnessing our power. And then we start to really, the thing about the first quarter moon up to the full moon is that we start taking active steps to get out in front of the obstacles before they become challenges that we have to react to, right? And so Mercury in a sextile to Mars on the 5th, which is what we're going to next. Let's show it here on the chart. Mercury, like I said, is you got confidence of Mars and Leo, and then you have Mercury and Gemini, which again is curious and adaptable and versatile and very sharp. Okay, so you have this sextile from Mercury and Leo, and we're definitely in the territory of Orion. So Orion starseeds, this is going to be very familiar for those of us who have strong Orion in our chart, in terms of, really utilizing that sharp analytical thinking and then the confident action, right? That solar plexus energy that goes along with being an Orion starseed. So you might feel a surge of mental clarity, some enthusiasm, really excellent time for brainstorming, pitching ideas. So we've gotten to this point here where if you build it, they will come, right? And now we're actually taking active steps to engage that energy, taking that plunge and doing something with it, right? So again, brainstorming, pitching ideas, engaging in really spirited debates, right? It's a great time for creative projects or public speaking with Mercury sextile Mars, especially Mars and Leo being so confident and really being a flair for the dramatic and being very performative, and then Mercury just being so sharp, so clear mentally. And, the downside, of course, is being too overly dramatic or pushy, and Mercury in Gemini scattering your focus if you're not channeling it properly. So just stay mindful of coming on too strong or juggling too many ideas at once, right? So harnessing this energy by setting clear intentions, right? Focusing on tasks that benefit both from intellectual dexterity and bold execution. So, that Venus Chiron conjunction that comes before this, I think, is going to be a necessary reality check and a sense of if I don't hold all these ideas, what is my worth? Or the downside to it is, I can't, I'm afraid to let go of any of these things, or I'm afraid to not let go of any of these things. It's going to be different for everybody. So Mercury, speaking of Chiron, great segue. Speaking of Chiron coming into the next day, so it has this sextile to Mars, and then it sextiles Chiron, as I was just speaking about. And now we're still in the territory of Andromeda. We're in the Betelgeuse territory, so there's a vulnerability here. With Mercury and Gemini coming into conjunction with Betelgeuse, and certainly with Orion starseeds in general. This is kind of like your main energy, Orion starseeds, is Mercury in Gemini at these late degrees of Gemini. But the sextile to Chiron is going to give us this capacity to strip everything down to its bare essentials mentally, right? In terms of ideas, in terms of just our thought process, our consciousness, whatever we're working with in terms of our nervous system, right? You just strip it all down to the bare archetypal rhythm of existence. And that sextile to Chiron, I suspect, will, again, help us to juggle that which is important. It's, and maybe there's a gift that we have that we don't need to hold on to and juggle right now. This, again, is a lot about really bringing in that focus, narrowing it into what is most valuable and important right now. This sextile, again, is going to be very healing. It's going to give us this kind of mental clarity on how we can work with this energy instead of feeling overwhelmed by it. Absolutely. So again, Mercury just leading the charge. And of course, Venus comes into Taurus on that very same day. So I think there will just be kind of a settle into the reality that we are in. So hopefully it's a sigh of relief, but it may also be sliding down the garbage chute. So, and then Mercury meets Jupiter right after this. So this is a really mentally dynamic next weekend, right? Which is you're talking about the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th of June, early June. And Mercury is meeting Jupiter at the very last degree of Gemini before they both move into the sign of Cancer, which Jupiter is exalted in. This is going to be a really, in terms of Western astrology, this is going to be a really expansive energy in terms of our where we belong, our roots, and our ancestry, and our just how we individually feel and where we belong. But before that happens, Mercury and Jupiter come into a conjunction at 30 degrees Gemini, right? The show is over. Now comes the hour of decision. Now, normally these two planets rule signs and houses that are opposite each other. So when they come together, there is a blending or knowledge and understanding are pretty much one and the same when they come together. They activate each other. So there's enhanced communication. It's very bold. It's very optimistic. It's very grand. We're sharing grand ideas. There's intellectual expansion. Again, this is a very Orion nature. A thirst for knowledge may lead to studying new subjects, right? Exploring philosophies, engaging in debates. I feel like there's going to be a lot of conversation that's going to be happening, a lot of information over the next 2 weeks is with Mercury and Gemini and all of the things it's going to be doing. Social opportunities for networking and social interactions with this conjunction, but I would say, again, scattered thinking may lead to exaggeration or overlooking details, so avoid overcommitting, spreading yourself too thin, but I have a feeling that this conjunction at this very last degree of Gemini is going to be like, this is the hour of decision, where you mentally and in terms of your understanding about to plant your flag, because that is Cancer. Right, where your root system goes down and is going to expand downward into what stabilizes you. So again, there's going to be a lot of conversation. There's going to be a lot of information that's coming. Mercury is going to square Saturn and Neptune right after this, leading up to our full moon in Sagittarius on the 11th. This square is going to be the first challenge of all of this Cancer energy, squaring Saturn and Neptune coming into Aries. So this first square, which is going to be with Saturn, is going to be a lot of tension between emotional communication, assertive but disciplined energy with Saturn and Aries. I get the Emperor in terms of an archetype, right? The Emperor, number 4 in the tarot, with this Saturn and Aries energy. It's very structured. It's very disciplined. It has a restriction because there's an authority to it, but it also is very, like I said, it's very assertive, and there's a lot of pioneering energy here, and very authoritative as well. And in a way that's, like I said, it's very assertive. So Mercury in Cancer is fostering like this intuitive and nurturing expression and conversation, and it's focused on personal values, family matters. But then you have Saturn in Aries. This is imposing structure, right? Discipline, and it can be very frustrating. And this square is going to potentially manifest as challenges into expressing things clearly, right? Because Saturn's going to be very restrictive, and Mercury is going to want to, especially in Cancer, have this emotional flow. So you might feel blocked, you may feel criticized. On this very same day, speaking of squares, you're also going to have, so this is a cardinal square, and then you're going to have a square with Venus and Pluto. As well. And this, especially now that she's in Taurus, right? She really seeks stability and comfort and sensual pleasure. So there is a tension, again, that's going to be forcing confrontations with control and obsession and the strong need to cling to security. So more power struggles and some really difficult experiences around communication with Mercury in a square to Saturn. So I think at this point, especially with whatever is communicated or what comes up with the Mercury-Jupiter conjunction on the 8th, right after it with these squares and Jupiter coming into Cancer, because it's not, and Mercury's going to square Neptune as well. And so confusion, emotional overwhelm with Mercury in Cancer. There could be risks of delusion and impulsivity, unclear intentions, especially because I just get this sense that things are going to really start being tested at this point. And then we come into the full moon, and the sun is going to be in a very tumultuous position in Gemini, and really highlighting our ability to really act in full trust of where things are going, even though they're not quite there yet, and we're just in a state of upheaval. Because that does seem like it's going to be happening, especially leading out of that weekend into the full moon. So that's really going to do it for the astrological forecast part of things. And of course, we'll come back and we'll talk about this Sagittarius full moon when it gets closer to the time, provided that we still even have internet or an ability to communicate. But my friends, I'm going to leave it there for today. So, of course, next week we're going to, I'll be putting up the energy reading for the Catalyst membership. So again, you can always check that out in the description box below. Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Thanks for sticking with me for this long form content that I enjoy putting out. I like to be thorough. Anybody who's had a reading with me knows that my readings are very jam-packed, just like these forecasts. They are full of information. They are full of nuggets that land in so many different places when you go back and listen to the recording at different times. And it's important to me that I am as thorough as I can be. I know that people's attention spans really just want their snippet, but that's not how this astrology works. So I really do appreciate you being here and being part of this process. So if you are interested in your own reading or energy work, the link to my website is in the description box below, as well as everything else. If you would like to donate a one-time donation to support this work, the links to that are also in the description box. So take care of yourselves, people. Realize that, that we've been creating, crafting, building, putting together, formulating the tools necessary to address or to harness that which life is giving us in a very positive way, and to trust your gut. To trust your gut, be aware of the pitfalls, definitely, and know that this whole lunar cycle, which is going to take us through the solstice, by the way, I just want to put that out there, that by the time we get to the full moon into the next new moon, the solstice will be in the middle of that, and that will be where we really start identifying fully with that root system that is meant to sustain us through all of the storms and trials that are going to be continuing to come our way, right? So thank you for being here, as always. Take care of yourselves. Take care of each other the best you can. Make sure you interact with this content if you really enjoy it and value it, and allow other people's the opportunity for it to show up on their feed. I love you guys. Thank you so much, and I will talk to you hopefully sooner than later. Peace.